Welcome to another episode of Leadership Talks, our podcast series here. Today we are looking at the very fascinating topic of ESG, how to explore, adopt, and look at the impact of ESG practices, especially in the context of Vietnamese businesses. And our spectacular guest today is not just passionate about it, he's also an expert in the topic, not just from a university perspective, but especially from running and transforming business ideas in that area. And it's no other than Grisha Safarian, Managing Director of Puratos Grand Place Indochina.
Correct.
That's a mouthful. What does your company focus on?
Our company is a B2B manufacturer and supplier of ingredients for the bakery, patisserie, and chocolate. And my background among those three SBU is mostly on chocolate. I'm a cocoa supply chain and chocolate expert for at least 35 years, which makes me older than I want to be, but that's the situation. Let's face it.
So other people would die for being able to work with chocolate every day. Do you have just a very sweet tooth, or how did that love relationship start?
No, I think chocolate is a fascinating product, especially cocoa. I mean, the most of you have never seen what is called the cocoa pod. I mean, the fruit that is containing the cocoa beans, what will become later chocolate. But this is, first of all, one of the most beautiful fruit in the world because it comes in all kind of colors. And the process from the tree all the way down to chocolate, that actually in Vietnam we do 100% in full vertical integration. This process is full of mysteries, innovation, new technology. And so this is a field in which I found ways to develop my creativity more than I could dream of. Because I wanted to be a musician when I was 20 years old. I had a band and I ended up in chocolate. But actually the creativity level for me is same level.
So creativity is the passion, the fun achievement part. Today we want to talk about the must-dos to keep it sustainable, and that ESG.
Exactly.
What's ESG for you and in the Vietnamese context?
Okay, so I try to make the definitions of ESG and sustainability simple, because if you talk with 100 people, you will get 100 definitions. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Okay, and it is, the principle is actually that for the last 200 years, making business under capitalism rules has been about making one stakeholder, the shareholder, making him wealthy to the detriment of the environment and many other stakeholders. And so ESG sustainability is trying to move shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And that's when we start looking not only at making the shareholder rewarded as he deserves, but also the suppliers, the planet, the employees. You try to make everything right, and you try to make a business that is sustainable, meaning that you are not using the resource of the planet without renewing them or paying for them.
So now one could argue, but that's how it's always been done. And if I'm the only one who change, am I not just the one losing out because suddenly maybe my costs go up, my process is slower, and I might not be able to do what I've been doing?
Thank you for that question. The same could be said about slavery. In USA, a few hundred years ago, you had slaves working for free. You know, you just had to give them food, and so the cost of production of cotton in the cotton field was artificially low because you would not pay the labor the real price. So this was not accepted for long. I mean, it's no longer accepted. Mm-hmm. Today, you would never accept that I decrease the price of my chocolate by telling you, oh, you know, this month I'm not going to pay my workers. or I'm not going to pay for my electricity. You have to pay for everything. And so sustainability and ESG is just saying that there is one category of cost that we don't pay for, and this is everything we take from the environment. And the new rules of stakeholder capitalism is about accounting for the cost of the environmental resource you are using and putting it in your balance sheet and P&L. This is really okay. If you create a lot of CO2, if you pollute a lot of water, if you put plastic in the sea, okay, that's part of your process. Please keep doing it. Just pay for it. Because if you have to pay for it, you will not do it anymore. Yeah. That's the principle.
The principle is clear and easy to understand. Now that we are in a transition period where some companies are moving ahead and start factoring the costs in, and others are not doing it, doesn't that create that unfair disadvantage for those doing the right thing right now?
Exactly. And this is of course a major issue. So if you are the shareholder or the executive board of a big company, you have to choose. You can see short term or medium term, then you should not engage into ESG or sustainable strategy. But if you think about the fact that increasingly the young generations are no longer accepting that we keep destroying the planet like this, that increasingly we see that the resource of the planet are not unlimited. That's what we thought when there were 1 or 2 billion people on the planet, but we are reaching 10 billion soon. So the resources are getting smaller and smaller with the growth of population. And so this sustainability, meaning the renewal of all the resource, has to be the priority of any company of this world. And so my stand, my position in this situation is that ESG and sustainability is not a choice, it's an obligation. And of course, a lot of companies are going to try to delay the obligation for as long as they can, just to save cost. And these companies, I believe, will disappear on the long term. Because the same way a company who decides not to invest in new machines, invest in talented people, invest in whatever new technology can help them to improve their production, if you stop investing, you are killing yourself. So ESG, sustainability, is an investment, not a cost. And those companies who refuse to do this investment, they will end up like, Kodak, for example, who missed the digital revolution. They had everything on their table, they did not see it, and so now nobody knows them anymore. Those companies who are going to miss the ESG sustainability revolution, they will disappear. And of course, those who are taking this train at an early stage, as we try to do with my company, they will benefit. That's my optimistic view, okay?
Okay, then let's use your company as an example, right? So how do you pace it out? Because the flip side is often what I've heard is enough is never enough. Fast is not fast enough how we could or should change. Same time, we shouldn't wait 50 years to get it done. So how do you decide what's the right pace and strategy on that journey? Because it's not just a switch you flip.
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, because this afternoon we received an ESG award among 20. We were one of the 20 foreign direct investment companies to receive that award. And there was a panel discussing exactly this. You don't decide overnight, okay, today I'm not sustainable, tomorrow I will be. It's a journey, it's a never-ending journey. And you are right, it's never fast enough, deep enough, and so on. But the important thing is that today has to be better than yesterday and less good than tomorrow. That's the very first point. So in our case, what do we do? First of all, it helps if you can create creative thinking culture in your company, because creative thinking leads to innovation. Innovation can take you to strong product improvement and to value creation. So for me, the sustainable strategy of our company is first, we create value. And value creation in a business like chocolate that has not seen an innovation for the last 100 years, you really need to find something. And we found that in Vietnam. We actually created a new process of fermentation of the cocoa bean in wooden box, inspiring ourselves from the wine industry. And so we, in Vietnam, are making a very special chocolate that we can sell at a higher price because it's more related to a great wine than to a Kit Kat bar. So that's the first step, value creation. And when you create value in your supply chain, then you can decide, stakeholder capitalism, you can decide to share the value created with, for example, the cocoa farmers to make sure they continue doing a great job with high quality cocoa, or with the environment, for example, by planting trees. And that's what we do. This is a process that started about 10 years ago. Value creation, fermentation in wooden box, low temperature roasting. So I think we make one of the best chocolate in the world in Vietnam. And amazingly, most of the Vietnamese people don't know that. So, but they will eventually. We sell this at a premium, and the premium, we share it mostly with two stakeholders, the farmers and the environment. On top of this, we have installed solar panel on our factories, on the roofs. We are fully vertically integrated, so our transport are not creating a lot of carbon emission because, we go from Bến Tre to Ho Chi Minh and from Ho Chi Minh to Bình Trung. Our cocoa bean does not go 3 times around the world in a vessel. So we were able earlier this year to create, and it's a first in the cocoa supply chain, we were able to create the very first carbon neutral chocolate in Vietnam. And that is one of the things that makes me very, very proud, because it's the outcome of a journey that started back in 2008. And that's the other thing about ESG and sustainability. It's very long. And so the main challenge is to keep your team and your shareholders and your board of directors motivated and engaged, because not everybody has the long-term vision.
One thing that you said is interesting. You said, okay, it's a premium chocolate. So is it by default premium products that have it easier because their customers can afford a value-based decision compared to staples like rice or fuel for cars? And we saw that, for example, with Tesla and electric cars, they started with a sports luxury item before they went slowly down mass market.
Very good question. We are already in the Tesla situation. So the carbon neutral chocolate I'm telling you about, fermentation in wooden box, is our top range. But then, of course, we have a lot of different products that are also sustainable, but more affordable, and that are used, for example, to cover ice cream. So most of the ice cream you eat in Vietnam, if there's chocolate around, it's our chocolate. Coming from the work of the farmers in Bến Tre and in Đắk Lắk. So yes, you are right. You have the top range, which is pulling your entire ecosystem.
But isn't that to some extent the same like NASA doing a lot of kind of fundamental research at a very high premium price that then decades later finds its way into everybody electronics? So you need that premium kind of elite approach sometimes to really have those leaps.
Absolutely. But one interesting thing about the ESG dynamic is that, okay, the cocoa supply chain is a very difficult supply chain. In Africa, the farmers are living under poverty standards. You have child labor, you have slave labor, deforestation. So it's a very tainted supply chain. And in Vietnam, we have developed a model where we cover all the angles and we do things right. Okay? So there's no child labor in cocoa in Vietnam, no slave labor, no deforestation. And actually, you could say, okay, we get a competitive edge, we have an advantage, so we're going to, kill all the competitors. But we are too small. So what I need is for my competitors to copy our model and copy our sustainable cocoa sourcing strategy. So that's one of the things that is very important in ESG and sustainability. It is going to create competitive advantage eventually, but it should start with the collaboration effort of the same industry. That's very important.
And that is one industry, one country. But what I hear a lot is we can do it here, but then country A, B, C, who are not doing that, will take market share from us. So we have to wait until the big brother moves before we don't price ourselves out of the market.
Yeah, it's a valid point. What I can tell you is that what makes me optimistic is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to hide anything to the consumer. You know, social network, I mean, somebody sneezes on the other side of the world, you see it on the social network after 3 seconds. So the reality of any non-sustainable business is going to pop up increasingly. And then every industry will have to do its homework and to clean its act. And again, the sooner we start, the faster we will be in a competitive situation.
So it's one thing to do the right thing out of your own motivation because you've seen something, you believe in something. And then there are those companies and people that might need a little bit more of a nudge or incentive. We've seen that in many other disciplines on multiple ways, if it's not from the customer. One, it's the stakeholders, so the financial markets require certain reporting. Then we see it from large global companies that are asking downwards their supply chain that everybody needs to follow a certain standard. And then last but not least, it's government regulations or enforcement or incentives. How do you see this happening, especially for Vietnamese businesses?
I think for Vietnamese businesses, until one and a half year ago, sustainability and ESG were very obscure trends that, okay, you start hearing about it, you don't even understand exactly the concept. There was not much was moving. And then came COP26, the conference of the party in, I think it was in Dublin 2 years ago. And there was a kind of very strong move from the Vietnamese government. They went to COP26 with a very strong delegation, including the Prime Minister. And they took some serious commitment there. And that is the start, that was the start in Vietnam of the ESG revolution. Because the government is now understanding fully that, okay, this is the future. If the country does not turn into green, to speak in general terms, it will be penalized in the future. And actually, it's already visible because a few weeks ago, the European Union took some new regulations, law enforcement, saying that any goods that comes from an area in the world where there is deforestation will be forbidden to enter European Union. So, you know, if you start attacking the business, everybody is going to pay attention, right? So the Vietnamese government, I would say, is impressive in this dynamic of pushing the country to become green, because 5 or 10 years ago, it was far from being green. If you look at the plastic pollution and things like this. Then to come back to your question, you have those stakeholders, those companies who are doing a voluntary move. Right now, it's a minority. And then you have those companies who are going to make an incentive move, I would say. And the incentive for those companies is going to be, okay, regulation like the one taken by the European Union, but also, for example, tax incentive. The Vietnamese government is working on a law that will give tax incentive to those companies who can demonstrate ESG KPIs. There are also very strong and very important initiatives from Harvard University, also coming from France, from Stanford, that are aiming at changing the international accounting rule. It's called impact-weighted accounting. It means that if you destroy the environment for $2 billion and you show in your balance sheet $1 billion profit, you will have to take into account the 2 billion of destruction, and then your profit will become a loss of 1 billion, right? Then, of course, what's going to happen when you have to abide to this new accounting regulation? You will have to go to your shareholders. You are the CEO. You go to your shareholders and say, sorry, guys, last year it was 1 billion profit. This year, change of rules, it's 1 billion loss. You're going to be fired as a CEO, or you're going to be instructed to change the rules and to stop destroying the environment or to do something. And that's the way that companies are going to the companies who are not doing the voluntary move, they are going to make the move anyway, because there will be incentive and there will be regulation to push them. And that's, right now it's still a bit messy. It's a bit a jungle, too many definitions. But a lot of people are working on scientific metrics to define sustainability KPIs that I believe 10, 15 years later, the world is going to be a very different place thanks to those change of rules.
Another challenge quoted often is technology is not ready. We can't do it even if we wanted it. Our people don't know. The workforce is not ready. I hear so many obstacles there. From your point of view, and I'm sure every industry is different, how much truth is to that and how much is just excuse?
I'm not going to answer to that one. I'm going to quote my absolute god in terms of sustainability, Paul Polman, ex-CEO of Unilever, who made a very, first of all, he wrote a book which is called Net Positive, calling for companies not to target net neutrality, net zero, but to get net positive, so to absorb more CO2 than they issue. And what he says, and I totally agree with that, the money is there. There's money everywhere. So financing sustainability is not an issue at all. The technology is there. What is missing is the spirit, the mindset. And he said that he's referring to greed. The number one of the United Nations, Mr. Gutierrez, Antonio Guterres, also referred to greed as the concept that is driving the old shareholder capitalism. And so when we manage to move the mindset into stakeholder capitalism and to go from greed to green, that is when you are going to see a big change. But the problem is not the technology and not the finance. Both of them are ready to save the world big time. But the mindset, I mean, we in this room, we are still admiring what is big, what is rich, what is powerful. So do you want to admire a guy who is a billionaire, or do you want to admire in the future a guy who planted a billion tree? You see, that's the change of mindset that we are trying. I am personally trying to push. So my lecture, a lecture that I do often in different universities, is called From Greed to Green. And, it's simple. And because it's simple, it's impactful. And I get a lot of positive comments from trying to push simple ideas in the field of sustainability.
So a lot of examples that we heard and also that you shared were about international companies that are leading the change. Are they really leading the change and are way ahead of Vietnamese businesses? Or is it at the end of the day also a matter of just talking about it? And some people talk more than they do, and Vietnamese business sometimes just don't talk about the progress.
From what I know about the culture in Vietnam, once Vietnamese companies take the ESG train, it's going to go quite fast and deeply. It has not happened yet. And so you only have a few companies now who are really engaging into that. But, it's growing, it's coming. Comparing the situation in Vietnam with international companies is very difficult because, as you just rightfully said, the international companies, they talk a lot. We are not sure if they walk the talk, okay? Some of them do, some of them don't, and some of them are somewhere in between. My point about Vietnam is that I can feel now the momentum is coming. The momentum is growing. You have big name listed companies in Vietnam that are really starting to communicate and act in a more sustainable way. And I think that is a trend that cannot be reversed or stopped. It can only grow up and faster. So I'm quite confident. And also, Vietnam is a country that has a fantastic opportunity of tourism with, 2,000 kilometers of coast and jungles and all these fantastic natural resources like the Halong Bay. So do you really want to let all these wonders be spoiled by plastic and oil pollution and so on? I don't think it's going to happen, because Vietnam would never accept to kill its tourism potential. So there's still a lot of work to do, but I am confident that it will happen.
Maybe two last topics before we wrap up. Number one is, we talked about all kinds of stakeholders. One topic, one group we haven't addressed, employees. Do you think change can also come from within? Or with the new generations entering the job market, say, I only want to work for a company that does the right thing?
Okay, so Paul Pullman, the ex-CEO of Unilever that I already mentioned, he made a study about I don't remember which term, the Gen X or Gen Z, whatever. I'm a bit lost because I'm from the baby boomer, okay? But anyway, 65% of the young generation, they don't want to work in a company that doesn't have a true sustainable strategy. Okay, so of course communication is going to get in the middle and so on, but there is a trend. The young generation, they will not buy it anymore. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what we call ESG, sustainability, higher purpose, has to benefit your employees, of course. And this is one of the challenges, because sometimes applying an ESG strategy is going to be costly or detrimental to some of the KPIs or the bonus of the employees. And so you need to really dig into the culture of the company and make sure that you adapt the bonus KPIs, the targets of each department, so that we embrace sustainability as a whole, actually.
Thank you very much. Maybe as the very last insight I would ask you to share is, we talked about a very big topics, a long journey, and that adds complexity.
Yes.
So I assume a lot of business leaders are stunned by that and asking themselves, where should I start? So maybe from your experience, from your point of view, from being an award winner, what are some of the easiest steps to get started?
There's no easy step to get started. There is a mandatory step to get started, which is to engage with the culture of the company. You really need to get into the DNA of the company. You need to adapt your strategy, and you need to communicate internally, because sustainability cannot be implemented by one person in an organization. It has to be a joint effort of the entire team, and this requires a culture change. You know, really this concept, greed to green, stakeholder capitalism, these are concepts that are not difficult to understand, but you need to be convincing. And once you have started the seedling of this change, then you're going to see that sustainability initiatives are going to come from different members of the organization. And that's where the creativity becomes important. So I would always recommend to start by addressing the culture of the company and the strategy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So that was Grisha Safarian, Managing Director of Puratos Grand Place Indochina. And we learned so much about ESG, going green, moving from shareholders to stakeholder engagement, going from greed to green, what to look out for, where to start, and what's already done. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for welcoming me and giving me the opportunity to explain how I feel about ESG.